This is the Evergreen Empire.
Green grow the forests and fair flow the streams. The gentle deer grazes, the wild blossom gleams. From ocean wave raging to mountain serene, all nature's proclaiming our land's evergreen.
Welcome to Columbia Conversations. I'm Felix Bunnell, editor of Columbia Magazine for the Washington State Historical Society. On this episode, we speak with photographer, writer, and historian Gene Sherrard about the wintry weather of February 2019. We look at how this was the Seattle area's first big snowstorm of the social media era, and what this means from a historical perspective.
Going back 100 years, you only have a handful of images, so it kind of makes it makes each one a little more precious.
Gene Sherrard co-produces the very popular Now and Then column with Paul Dorpat for the Seattle Times. I spoke with Gene by phone from his home in Seattle as the area was still dotted with unmelted snow from February's big storm. It seems like, obviously, and this is kind of probably clearly obvious, the further you go back in time, the fewer images there are of particular snowstorms. Where in 1880, there's maybe 10 or maybe a dozen, and a bunch more in 1916 and everything. But it seems like with the big snow of 2019, more photographs than I've ever seen of any Seattle snowstorm in the history of mankind. So talk to me a little bit about the number of photographs, like just from what you've observed on social media, and then what you've done in terms of the blog with Paul about the earlier snowstorms, about the difference between the sheer quantity of photos for this most recent storm.
Well, of course, what we have now is, over the last 10 years, maybe more, we've got an army of photographers out there, and everyone is taking pictures of everything. And so, as I was down in the market, because I make an effort to take a record of the latest snowfall from certain positions, because I'm repeating photographs that were taken long ago. And whenever I'm out there, what's astonishing to me is to see the number of people with their cell phones up taking pictures, and you know that this is happening all over the world. So that's a phenomenon of our shifting technology, in that we're now a world of photographers. So yeah, we see, from 1880 when there were a handful of photographers in downtown Seattle, and a few of them would get out in the snow with their equipment and take a few photographs. As you say, maybe a dozen. Today, I'd be surprised if there weren't hundreds of thousands of photos of our snow event, or more. It's almost incalculable. So I think the role of someone going out and taking pictures today is to find, my role is to find something significant about the snow in particular, rather than just choose a generic photo. So but it is interesting to see how, and this is all over the world, of course. You can poke a pin in any section of the map and on the planet, and there's likely 1,000 photos taken from that perspective. But as far as the snows in Seattle go, when we have an event like this, which is in its own way unique, I think we break at least 50 years of records with this last snowfall. It seems like, of course, people are going to be out celebrating it in photographs and sending them all over the world. So that's to me, that's just kind of delightful. I'm happy to be a participant in that recording. And so the next process is we have to choose the good ones. What really captured? You know what I mean? Like, now we've got to start editing and which of these photos is gonna really evoke the snow as it happened in 2019. And so that's our next chore, is to winnow and find some great ones. But there are a lot out there that are delightful.
Think of the historian like Paul or you or me looking at photos of the snowstorm of 1880 and the few you have to sift through. Think about someone 100 years from now looking at the snow of 2019. Imagine what they will have to sift through if that stuff still exists on hard drives or social media or somehow. That's just mind-boggling to me.
It is, and and this is something I really can't. Uh, I don't think it's fathomable. I mean, how do we gather and then wander through this astonishing amount of information? And I think this is true of snow photos and photography in general. And there's at this point we don't have the editorial winnowing process, which used to be conducted by media, by newspapers, and that no longer exists. There's no one saying this is good and this isn't, and we're going to save this and we're not going to save that. So it's for future historians, for someone 100 years from now, it's the at one and the same time the amount of material is going to be so staggering it will probably overwhelm. There'll probably have to be some kind of artificial intelligence aspect to this, where you can wander through all of these selections of photos with specific. You want to look at a picture from a specific angle on a specific street. You might just tap that into your AI and say, this is what I want, and you'll find it. But I think that is our chore today, is how to get through the vast quantity of material that's just kind of it's a waterfall, and each of us are mere pipettes, and how can we process all this stuff? So I'm sure it's going to be just as even more of a quandary in the future, looking through this vast quantity of material. And you're right. Going back 100 years, we can, whether it's the Seattle snow in 1880, where there's only a dozen images, or the Seattle fire the year before, or 9 years later, you only have a handful of images, so it kind of makes it makes each one a little more precious. And what does that say about how we value images today, when in place of a dozen we have a million? So I think we have to recreate a system that allows us to evaluate what's significant, and I can only do that for myself at this point. There's so much out there. So.
Other thing that was cool about this storm, a couple things. All this stuff, in previous storms, and part of my thesis is that this big snow of 2019, this is the first big snow in Seattle of the social media era. We've had some smaller storms in the last decade, but this is the first one where 99% of people have a smartphone in hand, and 90% of people are on social media and sharing pictures. And I think that makes this storm very different from the one of 2008, where very few people had that kind of technology in their pocket, which I think is really cool. I think this makes this storm historic for reasons beyond the amount of snowfall or the number of days the city was shut down. This is the first one. And sure, in the social media age in the last 10 plus years or so, other cities of the world where snow happens every year, people have been taking pictures. But snow means more in Seattle because it is so rare, and when it comes, it's so constricting and just shuts everything down. So it makes this storm very special to me. And the fact that people are sharing stuff in real time on social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that's never happened before for me. Usually it's like you'll see some pictures a few days later, or there's something in the newspaper. But there was like real-time coverage of subtle differences in amounts of snowfall and kinds of snow all over Puget Sound. And that was just, I couldn't take my eyes away from that.
Yeah, that was indeed wonderful. So you'd see, the Northwest is made up of microclimates in any case, but we saw an example of this just on Facebook, in which people from all over the area were posting their instant reflections on and the amount of snow they had out their back door, and that could change within a 5-mile radius. So that's the other thing we have, is it gives us an overall record of exactly what was happening at any given minute during these snowfalls. And of course, the other part of it is with Seattle snows is they almost always fall and melt on the roads, laying down that slick layer of ice. And so and I can attest to this, going out and trying to take pictures of snow for the last 20 years or so. That layer of ice makes any kind of travel, even if it's under the secondary layer of snow, it makes it all travel through snow in Seattle more treacherous than anywhere else because of that first melting and then the snow laying over the melting. So with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people taking photos, we can experience the snow of the region and the subjective impressions of individuals looking at snow out their back door or on their front porch, and not have to go traveling over that incredibly treacherous layer of ice. So I think that's another advantage. Lives were saved by the sheer numbers of cell phone images that ended up online.
Yeah,
no one had to go out in search of it, unless you were going sledding, and then you're just having a whale of a time. But in that, I would agree. That is that's a big part of it. Is we can now focus in on the minutia and the individual joys that each of us experience, rather than depending on the moderator to tell us what we're looking at and how we can perceive it. Every one of us contributes to this, and it becomes a sort of and I think that's part of the ritual now, is with social media, we're all given the tools to interpret our experiences of something so unique as a massive Seattle snow.
Yeah. And for me, the iconic image of this snowstorm is a ruler stuck in somebody's backyard snowdrift. And that was like, I can't tell you how many dozens of images I saw from all over Puget Sound of different kinds of rulers or yardsticks in some cases stuck in a backyard snowdrift. That's the iconic image for me that sticks out from this storm.
That is it. And I love, the other one I loved was actually just I think a found image of someone going out to a parking lot. I think it was in North Seattle, and just as the snow began, just in an empty parking lot, spinning around in their car and creating pretty glorious. It was like a flower design, but it was kind of marvelous. And these are, these are all expressions of delight. And I was thinking at the time, if we were anywhere, if we were outside of our particular general weather pattern, if we're in Juneau, Alaska, or if we're on the East Coast, it's not that special, but it's just that, where we are, this is so rare and delightful that I think everybody just steps outside and wants to capture it. It's like it's our equivalent of an eclipse. I mean, it is. It arrives, except we can't predict it with any regularity. So it's even more unique in Seattle when we walk outside and there's a foot of snow on the ground. It's kind of delightful. And isn't it wonderful how all the neighbors come out? How in wintertime, when most of us are staying warm inside, avoiding the rains, and we may wave to our neighbors. Isn't it when snow falls, these are where your neighborhood memories are made as well. So you have this passel of neighbors and the kids, and everyone's out there sledding and throwing snowballs and behaving in that wonderful and childlike fashion that many of us left behind, and then the snow brings it right back out.
Yeah, I feel like I'm friendlier when it snows. I say hi to people more. I'm walking past them on the way to the coffee shop or whatever. It's a little more. It's like it's where we're all sharing this community experience. It's like we're all in this together. And hey, I feel a little more comfortable just saying hi to anybody, which is wish I could be like that every day, but oh well.
You've nailed it. That's the, that is. There are. I think these are moments of carnival in which all of those the usual social barriers fall, and when we find those moments in a community, in a city, we as I say, usually they're scheduled. It can be a Mardi Gras, but I think that's what happens with the Seattle snow. Is it's an unexpected holiday, and the aspect of carnival is that all bets are off, all rules are suspended, nobody's going to work, and we're out there and we're just going to play. And the I guess that's part of the delight of a Seattle snow is that we know that in a certain sense nothing formal or official is expected of us. We can't. It's mission impossible if we're trying to get to work. And in fact, isn't it wonderful when the Weather Service says, "Don't even bother. Don't go to work. Stay home." Are you nuts? And it gives us all an excuse to play. It's just and get out there and take pictures, because then we're capturing these memories of play. So.
Yeah, and it's the one thing I noticed that it's and the way you describe it as a Mardi Gras or as a unscheduled holiday, that's why it fits in so perfectly to social media with all these moments, and these visual moments that are make everything looks different. You're standing out in front of your house, but it looks very different from the way it did 2 days ago. And I wonder, part of me wonders if, like, say the next big snowstorm in Seattle is scheduled for a decade from now, as they typically are. Will people still be as excited? Well, because this seemed like people went nuts with their cameras and with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff, just because it was just all these moments that people hadn't had in Seattle in the past decade. I wonder if that wonder or that interest in sharing things on these platforms will still be there for this next big storm, whether it's 5, 10, or 15 years from now. Any thoughts on that?
I guess I'd say that whatever social media becomes in the next 10, 15 years, we're never going to lose the joy of direct experience, and the interpretation of that experience may change. We may come to understand it in different ways, and we may communicate it in different ways. But the snow is rare enough that if it doesn't happen for 10 years, which it probably won't to this degree or more, the experience of change and the reinterpretation of the landscape, in which everything is covered with this kind of clean white blanket, that's so unique. It's have you ever seen the artist Christo at work? His big drapings of bridges and reinterpreting enormous sections of landscape, islands and bridges. That's sort of what snow does to Seattle, because we don't see it that often. So in that sense, I think because of its rarity and because of the way it momentarily, only usually for a few days at most, alters our landscape, I think we'll always be looking at that with excited and fresh and childlike eyes. And I can't imagine a world in which social media will blunt that. In fact, I think this is what pulls us, into direct contact with the world outside. And I think Seattleites are particularly susceptible to those kinds of direct contacts.
Well, Gene Sherrard, thank you so much for sharing your insights about snow and social media and photography in Seattle. This is a conversation that's almost as fun as playing out in the snow.
Thanks, Felix.
Thank you to Gene Sherrard for speaking with me for this episode of Columbia Conversations from the Washington State Historical Society. The column Gene produces with Paul Dorpat is available at seattletimes.com, and the two also collaborate on a blog at pauldorpat.com. For more information about Columbia Magazine or to subscribe, please visit washingtonhistory.org. I'm Felix Bunnell.